All right. Hi, everybody at home. Today we're going to be talking about House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 2. And with me, we have Zach. Say hi, Zach.
Hello, hi everybody.
Zach from the Interesting Nerd Club. I highly suggest checking his channel with, Tom. Yeah, great people. And I'm so excited to be talking about this episode with you today. Zach, what did we think about that episode?
That episode was pretty good. I feel like
Yeah.
the season being only 8 episodes led to some pacing issues that kept it from being truly great. But I enjoyed it quite a bit. There are a couple scenes I wish we got to vamp in a little bit longer, or that were more of a highlight. But
Sure.
the like winner scenes of this episode are real winners. The extended fight scene we got was as good as it could have been, I think.
Yes.
And so I solid like A minus B plus territory. I think the last episode was the first A I would have given out.
Cool.
This one shows that they're committed to like making a really good season so far, and it'd be surprising for me at this point if this season was not great.
Yeah, definitely. I would posit that this episode, I would even go as far as to say that this was probably my favorite episode, like, of House of the Dragon so far. And I'm wrestling between this and Lord of the Tides from last season, because I I thought like the acting this episode was just phenomenal from, who we have on screen, from Tom Glyn Carney and Otto Hightower, Rhaenyra, and Daemon. Like, the scenes of them having a shouting competition, I felt was, like, the dialogue there and the acting there was all superb.
Yes.
Like, some of my favorite scenes back in Game of Thrones were scenes that dealt with, like, the fallout of a big event, like the Red Wedding or, other things. And this episode felt like it was dealing with the fallout of the past 11 episodes that we've gotten. Like,
Yes.
I would say, like, this is the episode where, like, people finally, like, let down their walls and say the truth to each other. Like, in this episode, we get to see, like, Otto finally act as a grandfather towards Aegon instead of like a counselor,
Yeah,
just
and
shouting
we
at him.
get, we
And
get the difficult challenge if he has to give good political advice to somebody, he also has to be a grandparent towards.
yeah,
And that is an impossible situation for him when his grandson is Aegon II.
yes,
And
and
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just saying, like, that's what I really appreciated about this episode is that we get to see, like, everyone say what's, like, truly on their minds. Like, we see with Otto and Aegon, and we see with, like, Rhaenyra talking with Daemon, like, what she really thinks about him. And yeah, that it felt like we got some insight on what what some of the characters' motivations actually are. And yeah, I really appreciated that. So yeah, how this show works, and I should probably explain it for everyone at home. I have a series of images here, and me and Zach, we're just going to talk a little bit about these images. They're sort of like prompts for us. And right now we have Aegon on the screen. So, Zach, what did you think of Aegon's performance both this season and specifically this episode?
I think they're setting up very well that he is ruled by his overriding emotions, the emotions that can have a real physical impact on you. I have struggled with a lot of anxiety my whole life, and I know that the anger and like sadness have a physical impact on your body that can cause like a spiraling. And we see him spiral so much, and it's very visceral and very real when you see what the anger does to him, to the point where he is making decisions that he might even regret 10, 15 minutes later because he is letting the emotions swell up.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably the best acting we've seen from him because he has been like sort of dismissively evil and incompetent, and he's been abusive and terrible in ways that he was able to downplay, he was able to sidestep. We're now seeing him through the lens of somebody who does not have a grasp on his emotions.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a wonderful setup for what we know is going to happen in the story for the... because I was talking about this with Tom on our live stream. Aegon II probably has one of the greatest brain trusts ever assembled as a small council, and he is going to squander that away. We saw the beginnings of that this episode.
Exactly.
Otto Hightower, you can debate whether he's a good person. It's very hard to debate whether he is a good hand of the king. He is a person who is able to articulate his ideas and find workable solutions, and then you can discuss the humanitarian cost, but he's almost he's like a Nixonian level genius, and that he really does know all the things he's doing, and some of those things might be terrible, but if your ultimate goal is to win, Otto Hightower as your hand of the king is probably as good as you can get for anybody living in the Seven Kingdoms right now. And then, of course, you have the highly qualified Jason Lannister on his team. You have all these other people who are of excellent quality in a small council, and because they are not saying exactly what he wants to hear, that he's just going to dismiss all of it. He's just going to immediately throw out these wonderful ideas that will help him win. I mean, they're horrible from the realm of bleed standpoint. This is not a morally good team he's on, but is a winning the Super Bowl team. He has the all-star offensive lineup, and he is going to piss them away for yes men. Yeah, those yes men are coming out of the woodwork, and Kristen Cole as the ultimate yes man is being set up as well. That he is there to... He has very similar issues with his... He lets his anger stew, and he does not find healthy outlets for it. And they recognize that in each other, and that's why he is willing to hand over extreme amounts of power to somebody who also can't keep a cap on their anger and can't keep a hold on their emotions and can't find healthy outlets. Which I think is going to be the most compelling part of the season. If they can keep that up for the next 6 episodes and make that the emotional core of the story, I think that the inner politics of King's Landing getting worse and worse for everybody is going to be awesome, and I'm looking forward to that.
I totally agree with you. And I kind of feel like the reason Aegon gave Kristen Cole the position of Hand of the King, going off of what you said about him being someone who will just surround himself with yes men, but also about his impulsivity. I feel like the reason why he gave Kristen Cole the position of Hand of the King is because he was the closest person in proximity at that time when he made that decision. I feel like Aegon is a very much an out of sight, out of mind sort of person. Kristen Cole's in the room with me. I'm impulsive. I'm just gonna give him the position of Hand of the King.
Yeah. I'm going to make an impulsive decision, and I'm not even going to make it with the full council. I would have loved a scene where he is dressed down in front of the small council. He tries to fight back, and you see people start to cower to Aegon II's sort of view. But depending on how they tell the story, I might come back to admire the fact that he was literally fired in a private conversation in the king's room. Depending on how they handle this, depending on how they show the fall of his council, I think that might end up being better in retrospect than it was. I was hoping for something a lot more grandiose in that scene,
Mm-hmm.
but if they're going to show him slowly sidelining people, and then for today, oh well, we had to get rid of Otto. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, you come back and it's we had to let the Lannister go.
Yeah.
We had to let so and so. Sorry, Larry's, but we're not letting you stick around either.
Which
that could be very well done.
Yeah, I'm honestly a little bit surprised that Aegon, watching that Aegon didn't give the position of Hand of the King to Larys, which, I mean, like, we've read the books. We know that Kristen Cole would be Hand, but, from a filmmaker's perspective, like, Larys coming in with the suggestion of getting rid of Otto, people would have, been like, oh, Larys is like set up to be Hand of the King now. But, you get the most incompetent person to be a Hand of the King. Someone who beat the brains out of Joffrey Lonmouth during a wedding.
Yeah, yes. And I think that Larys, he would have had questions. He would have been like, okay, well, hold on, let's talk here. You still didn't get rid of the people in my court who ended up killing my son. If he's acting on pure emotion of what he feels is right, Larys, one, knows how to own up to a mistake, which is not what he is looking for. Kristen Cole is the exact person his overriding emotions are going to gravitate towards. If you're a person who has that sort of your worst emotions get control over you, somebody who is like that but a little bit more mature and a little bit more articulate with their emotions and able to who exudes some confidence the way that Cole does, you're going to look at that person as a role model, and I guarantee you that's exactly how he's thinking. I want to be more like Cole. He feels when you're overrun by those emotions, a lot of people feel like that's just an innate part of them. My anger is always righteous, and sometimes I might say do too much, or but it's there for a reason. And I wish I could be more like Cole, who I know faces the same anger but uses it in precision strikes, something like that. He would view the ability from Larry, as we know, is a horrible person. He's a schemer. He's willing to take out his own family, and we know from the books he's going to be so much worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's somebody you can reason with. You can sit down and have a 5-minute conversation with him about whether a strategy is practical, and he'll humor that conversation.
Yeah. And to Aegon, that's a weakness,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not acting out of anger and spite and sorrow and these other strong emotions. So he's a craven, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can't have a craven as Hand of the King. We need somebody who believes in big action, who's going to go fight and do the emotionally satisfying things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know what I'm scared of? I am scared that... Okay, I have not, I've made a mistake. I have not decided if this is a spoiler review or a non-spoiler review. I'm gonna say that, let's leave spoilers to the end. I have a point that I would like to go back on with Aegon. So I'll move this image to the very end. But one final thing I want to talk about is his relationship with Alicent and where you think that will be going. Because Alicent still thinks that she can, manipulate Aegon in some capacity. After this episode, and especially after Aegon giving Kristen Cole the position of Hand of the King, where do you think Aegon will be with Alicent?
I think she's able to try and make compelling arguments to him, but and she might be able to deflect him for a moment to speak to the better self of him that might be in there. but it's going to be completely undercut as long as there's somebody speaking what he wants to hear. And since he has the power to surround himself with yes men, she is going to lose her voice in his ear as the season goes on. She'll be able to go from getting him to reconsider to getting him essentially a cold shoulder. I think she might be like kept from or escorted out of a small council meeting by the end of the season, because there's nobody there to speak to her views of like, okay, moderation, let's come up with a plan here, let's offer terms to try and de-escalate the things that she wants to do, which might be more politically beneficial, are not going to sit in a room full of yes men who are, this is a level of like, when you cultivate a culture where you assume that you can't do any wrong, it's like an Iraq war level, like nobody in the room is going to say, hey, I think we're making some crucially bad mistakes right here, without getting like booted from the room. And I think that that's exactly how Allison is going to go down. She's going to be like, are you sure of the fight we're about to start? Are you sure the room we're in is telling you the truth, is being honest with you? And he's going to be offended by that, because those are his people. He picked them. Are you questioning my judgment? Yes. Well, yes, I am. But, you don't want to hear that right now. So I think I think Allison's ultimate destiny in her relationship with her son here is, it's almost sort of like Robb Stark on steroids, where Robb Stark would listen to his mom sometimes, but would crucially ignore her.
Even like Cersei and Joffrey.
Really good advice.
I mean, like the obvious comparison for me here is like with Cersei and Joffrey.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, Cersei had the problem. She would enable a lot of Joffrey's bullshit, and then you couldn't stop Joffrey from doing stupid things later because she had already enabled stupid things before. I think that it could be very similar, except that she is going to like immediately try and hard pivot. Like we are running straight towards disaster, and she is going to realize it's too little, too late.
Yeah, because Alicent has a moral compass, unlike Cersei. She knows that starting a war is probably a bad idea for both parties, and I'm interested to see like where Alicent goes from here, like after sort of being outcast from Aegon's council. A part of me thinks that she might become closer with Larys, and that's not fun to think about. Because like who else is going to like listen to her after her own son essentially just like outcasts her. I feel like Larys will try to capitalize off of that situation, which I don't know how that's going to go.
Yeah. I think that the most likely thing is she does find a couple allies in court, because we know, I think it's most likely that we're going to see Alicent mostly stay in court through the rest of this.
Yeah.
And we're going to see some power struggles break out. I think that even there are some people who are going to be powerful even if they're not on the small council, and Larys is one of those people where he has means, he has spies, he has other things he can do. If he ever gets booted off the small council, he can be part of like a shadow cabinet.
Yes.
If Alicent ever has one of those, I don't know whether he'll keep his council seat or whether he will lose it and regain it. There's a lot of ways they can go. What I could say is that he's going to be a force no matter who is in charge there. And I think that even if he could be, even if they're not in full control of King's Landing at any point, he could still be a major player, whether it is controlled by another member of the Greens, or it's controlled by the Blacks, or it's controlled by any number of people. He is static level of power he has, and then an additional level depending on who he's working with. If Alicent is funneling him information, funneling him resources, he still is a very, very powerful figure. And I think that she might make some deals with the devil also, where she is working with some of the more rational, some of the more politically minded people against Aegon's more ideological, extreme, and less critically thinking small council versus Alicent's rational but kind of like amoral shadow cabinet could be a
Mm-hmm.
fun aspect of the show that we might get.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that it is such a tragic thing that, at this point of the story, um, it was shown in episode 8 where Alicent and Rhaenyra kind of made up. But now that they have, these children, and Alicent has sort of, taught these children to hate Rhaenyra's side and hate Rhaenyra's children, like there's no going back. Like we've reached a point of no return where, Aegon is installed as king, and he's not going to make up with Rhaenyra's kids, even though Alicent and Rhaenyra might have made up in episode 8. It's this generational thing, and that's really tragic.
Yeah, yes.
Zach, do you want to talk a little bit about the funeral scene that
Yeah.
we've... It was shot in such a strangely, like, horrific way, which it was.
It reminds me of like an indie horror film a little bit.
It reminds
like
me...
It's mostly the characters' reactions to the weird, unsettling thing that's happening.
It reminds me almost of like a zombie movie, especially like the shot of Helena and Alicent in the carriage, and then there are all of these hands like grasping towards them.
Yeah, it is it has a human horror feel to it. A lot of my favorite horror films are very human. The monsters are other humans sometimes who have like powers or turn into something, but you get a lot of scenes of just people doing bad things. My favorite horror movie of all time, I think I've mentioned before, is Suspiria. You're mostly just dealing with like women who are witches, but the witch powers are not like turning them into weird, creepy monsters, except for the one at the very end. This is the horror of other human beings. That is what I like about that movie, which is what I like about this. These people have never met Helena. These people are overwhelmed with emotions because of a nationalistic or political like campaign to make them identify with this child they never met, never knew, and this woman they never met, never knew. And but one of my favorite bands of all time is Rush, and they talk about this a lot. Neil Peart, who wrote the lyrics, had like terrible social anxiety, and it was strange to him that there are people out there who like your music like was a huge like influence, changed my life sort of thing, and he's never met these people. And Helena is going through this terrible, horrible time. She has lost a child that is impossible for her to like process in the amount of time she's had to process it, and then she is surrounded by all these people feeling and showing outpourings of emotion while she's supposed to just sit there, and it is hard for her to chew on. And Alicent has to sit through not only losing, a grandchild, but also watching her own child go through that while she's going through it herself.
It's terrible. It's both a terrible thing to. It's both a terrible thing, but also like a really powerful play again by Otto Hightower, that you're parading this child down the streets of King's Landing, and you're getting these people to identify with this child, because all of a sudden it's like Rhaenyra, she's capable of killing children, so who's to say that she won't be killing your children as well? Something along the lines of that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the whole scene is wonderfully done in like a real not comfortable sort of way, and it shows you the human cost of the political projection here. That Helena was never signed up for this. Alicent, you could argue, knew there was political scheming going on for a while, but Helena probably never anticipated this, that she would be not only queen, but queen of a contested succession, and that she and her children would be targets. And then, of course, Jaehaerys could never have understood that he would be a target of a political assassination. So inability to deal with a tragedy and the understanding that you are here not of your own volition is, I think that it's going to be like the defining character arc for Helena, is that she is going to increasingly realize we're getting a very similar thing with Rhaenyra, where she doesn't have a lot of agency in a struggle that heavily involves her. Rhaenyra, I think, is going to reclaim some agency, and she's going to overcorrect. She is going to realize she has control and then take active bad decisions. I think Helena is going to realize ultimately she has no control. She can do nothing. Nobody is there to listen to her, and that her despair is only going to increase. Because while Rhaenyra, she is the queen. People are calling her the queen. She has the ability to ride a dragon and command a military. She has means to act upon her ideals. Helena doesn't have any of that. And if Aegon's not going to listen, nobody else will. Because if the king says don't listen to the queen, then nobody listens to the queen. And if Alicent is, taken out of power, then Helena is going to have the only person she can share that she trusts to tell people, to tell things to, is going to be just as powerless as she is. And that is a miserable feeling. And I think we're getting the setup of you have no agency. We have stripped you of agency as Helena's defining character arc.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you bring up with comparing Helena to Rhaenyra, because in this episode there was a small moment where Helena during the funeral scene was looking up, and the small folk were throwing what is that, oregano? Something. And that's sort of mirrored with, I don't think it's oregano. I don't think we're making a pizza here with Jaehaerys's body. That's no good. No. But later in the episode, Rhaenyra, when she's playing with Aegon the Younger and Viserys the Younger, she was looking towards the window, and there was this sort of the camera focused on the dust particles in the air, and I found that very interesting. And I take that as, sort of like a Daenerys moment of I'm not here to be Queen of the Ashes sort of situation going on. Where...
Yeah, why be queen at all if it means I'm going to lose my children, if it means I'm going to watch the people around me suffer? What exactly is there to gain here?
Yeah, if the only thing you're going to rule over is dust, essentially.
Yeah.
I rewatched the episodes, and I noticed that the funeral shroud of Jaehaerys, Helena was making that last episode.
Yeah.
Which is scary to think about. That
she knew it was coming, yes.
Yep. Ooh. Just the little details. Okay, so Zach, what's Helena's next vision, do you think? Are we gonna get it in episode 3?
I think we might see hints in the next episode that she's seeing a battle on the horizon, or she is seeing a change of power on the horizon, because she already seems defeated. The possible futures are narrowing for her.
Yeah.
And it seems like as she gets closer to things, she understands them better.
In fact, there's another spoilery thing that I can say about Helena that I'll probably move this back there. Do we want to talk about Daemon Targaryen and the fact that people seem to be surprised that he's kind of awful towards Rhaenyra? People...
I think that people were not expecting it to develop that quickly, but I think that we're seeing... We got introduced in the very first episode that he is very similar to Aegon, and that he is difficulty processing those tougher emotions to deal with. His anger, his resentment. He is ruled by his resentment. And anytime that he feels like somebody is not treating him the way he wants to be treated, it comes out very strongly. And that is whether that person is his wife, or whether that person is his friend, or whether that person is his brother. And we've seen him have conflicting emotions all over the place. And you could argue it's all serving his political endgame, but I really think if you go back to episode 8, like, you could really tell his brother's respect did mean something to him.
Yeah.
And while he shit talks his brother now, he clearly has conflicted opinions on him, and I feel like he has conflicted opinions on Rhaenyra. He in equal parts, like, loves and despises her, and he treats her like shit because if he just purely despised her, it wouldn't matter. He wouldn't be so passionate in telling her why he's upset, because if she just, was nothing to him, he wouldn't care anymore. But because his emotions are so entangled, he wants her to be more like the woman he envisioned her to be when he thought, we're both going to rule as, like, co-regents, or like co-rulers, basically. We're going to fight decisively. We're going to do whatever it takes to defeat the enemy. When he realizes that that's not her, and that, no, I'm the person in the succession, I'm the queen, you're my husband, I appreciate your counsel, but at the end of the day, I'm in charge. He's seething at that, because it's not the perfect world he had envisioned for himself. And I think we're going to see his demons take more and more possession of him, while he's still struggling with the fact that he feels so many emotions, and he puts on that, like, dour, emotionless Matt Smith face all the time, because he's got too many things he's chewing on underneath. And while he's definitely a shitty and vindictive and abusive partner, you can tell it's not from a place of sociopathy. It's not from a place of pure cruelty. It's from a place of not being able to separate the person he wants somebody to be from the person that they are. And it feels like a betrayal to him when Rhaenyra does not, like, high five him for, A, for effort on the assassinating Aemon thing, is probably what he was hoping to hear. And he can't process the fact that she rightfully is criticizing him for going behind her back, for making a sloppy decision. And I want to see more of this character, because I'm glad a worse show would have just written him as a cold-hearted sociopath with no emotions. Mm-hmm. And this show is better for showing him as so conflicted, and that making him, because he's not a good person. I joke a lot, I'll joke and say Daemon Targaryen, who did nothing wrong, but he does everything wrong. He does a lot of things wrong, but he's in love with the struggle a little bit. He wants to not just be. He wants to get all those things. He wants to see his power. He wants it all, and he's bad at compartmentalizing that he can't get it all, and that he has to find other ways, and he has to take compromises, and he has to be willing to lose sometimes, and that the people he cares about are going to have different ideas and different visions. And so I think we might see him get worse before he gets better, but I also think there might be some times where he is genuinely trying to make amends. He is genuinely trying to improve as a person, and then his hot-headedness, his resentment gets the better of him.
Yeah, or I feel like he doesn't necessarily...
A lot like Aegon the Second with his anger.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you mention that, he's sort of in love with the struggle, because I see that as his entire life he was sort of in the shadow of Viserys, the king. Now Viserys is dead, and now that Viserys is dead, like, what does Daemon really want? Like, I guess to fight this war, but besides fighting in this war and becoming a glorious hero or whatever, like, what do you think Daemon actually wants now that Viserys is gone and he can't really...
He always viewed himself as a leader, I think, a leader of men. He goes at the war with the crab feeder because it's a leadership opportunity. Yeah. He is always trying. He marries Rhaenyra, and I don't think it's a purely political move. I think he does feel strongly towards her in ways that are, like, oftentimes very toxic in their relationship.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is a relationship with no passion to him. He very much sees himself as someone who could be a good leader, who could be a good ruler, who knows he's capable of things, and that desire to see it through no matter what, that unflinching, uncompromising passion that he has is his greatest strength and his greatest weakness all rolled up into one. Because and I think George talks about this when he talks about how conflicted he is as a character, and people are like, "What the hell are you talking about? Damon is a conflicted character. You're like describing him as morally gray." I don't think that's what George is saying. I think George is saying the same things that could drive him to be a great person are what end up driving him to be a terrible person, and
Yeah.
it's always for reasons that are a lot more complicated than a pure. Because George seldom writes pure, unbridled sociopaths who have nothing going on under the hood. That is just
Except for
not
maybe
his type of
Ramsey.
villain. Except
That,
that Ramsey is probably
yeah.
our only example, and Ramsey is shown to be a shit ruler
Yeah.
who is also, not a person that anybody respects, and the fear that is around him does not lead people falling in line. It leads people scheming underneath him. Ramsey is probably the only, like, maybe some of the, like, really, like, wild and crazy and dangerous people that, like, Brienne meets on her journey. Some of them might be, like, what you consider a sociopath. But like, you look at Tywin and you can see the emotional damage that's done to him. And I feel like Daemon is the same way. He resents being a second son. He resents not having a marriage to a house that it would give him prestige and power in an argument to a greater seat on the council or a position of power. He resents not being hand of the king, which he thinks he'd be good at.
Yeah.
All these things are what informs his decision making, and you get where it comes from because he's clearly intelligent and he's clearly a good leader and a good fighter. He has these wonderful qualities, and the need for him to be recognized in all of them, the need for him to be acknowledged that he is smart and good and excellent, and to prove it again and again and again. It's almost like he has imposter syndrome a little bit, where he needs that constant validation, or it all starts to fall apart. And whenever he doesn't get it, he becomes this seething, angry, resentful mess of a person.
Yeah. Kind of like Aegon as well,
Yes.
That where I think Daemon really just wants validation and someone to say, he's done a good job and give him a pat on the back, which he's literally never received before, like on this show. Yeah. He goes to a war with the crab feeder, comes back in episode 4, and Viserys, he gives him a hug, and he, you can clearly see that he's happy in that moment. Which that's probably that's probably the only time he gets a pat on the back. But even that was tenuous.
He's always fighting for it too. It's not enough. He needs both internal and external validation, and they need to line up in a way that is very hard. He needs to know that he struggled and went through something, and he fought and he proved himself, and then he needs a ton of other people to say, yes, you did do a good thing. And you can't live like that because it's so rare, those moments.
Yeah.
That is where you get all of what drives you. And it's never enough for him because he always thinks he could do better. He clearly wants to be king, or at least he wants to be in a sort of like what the conciliator had with his wife, sort of like power dynamic, where at the very least he is the closest advisor to Rhaenyra when she is queen. And if he's not going to get that, it drives him mad, knowing that that's not the world that he lives in.
And this is not really a spoiler because we kind of get teased throughout the entire episode and in episode 1 as well. We know that Daemon's going to Harrenhal. Where do you think his story is going to go after this, after getting outcast from Rhaenyra's council, essentially?
I think he's going to use the opportunity that he is in military command, that he has that potential to prove himself. I think he'll be good. I think at least in the Nixonian definition, he will be a very effective of a leader. He will be doing terrible, horrible things and things that might have long-term consequences that are very bad. But I think he's going to say, I'm winning the war for you. And it'll be hard to argue that he's not doing that. I think that's probably where his character goes from here. Is he is actually going to do militarily and not humanitarianly a good job securing the Riverlands and the area around there
Mm-hmm.
for Rhaenyra, and then he's mostly going to be in conflict with Aemond in that time, which will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a comparison between Damon and Robert Baratheon, Bobby B, is probably there's probably something there in that Damon really strives in times of war, but hypothetically, let's say Rhaenyra wins the war tomorrow and everything is fine and dandy. Like, what do you think Damon's purpose becomes? Like, I feel like Damon would feel very lost without conflict.
Yes, I think that's the driving force of his characters. He has nothing to live for outside of the fight that he feels. He has portrayed his entire life as a fight, and a lot
Yeah.
of people who are not in good mental health, and a lot of people who are driven towards like extreme worldviews, view their entire existence as a conflict, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just not a good way to live. And that is how Damon has lived since he has been probably a very young man. And
Mm-hmm.
you can see that from his very first episode where he brings his own people in to crack down on the crime. Like he views every fight as his fight.
Yeah.
It's very similar. My favorite lines from The Wire is from Bunk, who says to McNulty, the police officer who always wants to bring in the big case. He says to him, "There you go, McNulty, giving a fuck when it's not your turn to give a fuck." Damon is that person. He can't. If there was a hunky dory time, he would be itching for something to do,
Yeah.
and that can be sometimes if you're putting that like energy into something good. Like if he was the one building up their defenses, he read about the others and was sending people to the wall and fostering a good relationship with the Night's Watch. There are positive outlets for that, but he doesn't really have the patience or the knowledge. He reacts off the cuff. He is almost certainly always going to use that fighting spirit he has for a pissing match at best, or something actively detrimental to the world at worst.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately what's going to be his downfall, is his need to always be in a fight.
Exactly. Interesting stuff. Okay, so the next thing I would like to talk about, and we kind of talked about him before, but Otto Hightower. I mean, we kind of did talk about him in the Aegon section. I'm trying to think what else is there to say about Otto. Do you have anything? I mean,
Otto's a terrible like ruler in an effective way, and there's like we get the line, in the main series we've had idiot kings and vicious kings, but I don't think we've ever had a vicious idiot king. It turns out Tyrion was wrong. We had Aegon the Second.
Yes.
Because that is clearly you can look at Otto and you can tell if there was a need to perform some horrible massacre to secure the rule. If it was absolutely the only way, he would sign off on it. It's when the rat catcher thing, I think, is a perfect example of an unnecessary tragedy. If you're going for a pure Machiavellian, a pure like autocrat's view of the world, the killing every rat catcher to kill the one who is in on the assassination is so not the play. And then hanging them from the walls for all to see is an unnecessary like self goal on ruining your own PR. It is a immediate show that you are willing to kill innocent people. It is an immediate show that you don't actually have investigative powers either. You're going to use scorched earth tactics to do these things, and you don't actually know what you're doing at all when it comes to government, when it comes to crime and punishment. And that sort of thing does not endear you to the people, and it does not particularly deter like criminals all that much either from them seeing all the like pain you're inflicting on people, because they'll just know that they need to take like harsher tactics to get away with it, or they need to get out of Dodge the second that they've been compromised. You're only stopping criminals who don't have the confidence in themselves to commit the crimes they're going to commit. Otto Hightower is smart. I guarantee he would have found Cheese eventually.
Yeah.
He would have got to him. He would have come up with a plan.
With Laris, probably.
To do this. But it's just not Aegon's style. He is too hot-headed. He is too emotionally invested in it. And Otto, like, he clearly feels emotions. You can see it on his face. His face often betrays his cool demeanor.
Especially in this episode.
Yeah. Oh, in this episode, the cracks start to show.
Yes.
You can see he is a skilled politician. He is a genius-level thinker. He uses that nominally for evil, but he always thinks of a greater good. And if you're, like, anti-Targaryen's consolidating power, I don't think his overarching goal is particularly evil. It's just how many evil steps do you need to take to a good outcome before you've, like, just done more evil. And also, notably, if you do all these evil things for a goal and then fail at it, did you do anything good to begin with?
Yeah.
You know, I need to do 82 evil things for a good outcome that is roughly equivalent to like, forgives me for 84 evil things, so I end up with a score of +2 at the end. If you get to 78 steps of evil things and then trip and fall and die, you didn't make the world a better place. And I feel like that's what Otto Hightower's ultimate character arc is going to be. Is we've had people call into our call-in show and say, yeah, I agree that this show is the ultimate, like, yeah, Targaryens probably shouldn't be in charge of Westeros, like, is a lesson you can walk away with. If that's his ultimate goal, I think he's going to fail, and I think he's going to have a moment where he realizes everything he did that he thought was for the good of the realm actively made it worse and didn't get the outcome that he wanted.
I think that happened this episode. I think he finally realizes that Aegon was probably the wrong decision for who to put on the Iron Throne, because he's just so impulsive.
He's getting some buyer's remorse for committing a coup. He committed a coup with the person who's the most politically expedient and made the argument the clearest, but who is going to cause so much damage that it was not actually worth it to do in the first place.
And it must feel so frustrating that you've been planning this for like 20 years.
Well, yeah, you've been planning this since before there was a kid to put on the throne, on the assumption that the kid would behave and be smart and be a good ruler, and the core assumption you had baked in was just flawed to begin with. The entire plan you had a structural failure right in the middle of it.
Yeah. Which goes again to, it's again the theme of, like, the generational trauma of this entire show. And I feel like the tagline of the show could be, things have not gone according to plan, in the words of Otto Hightower.
Yes.
Very many things. Okay. Let's just... Oh, Alicol! Zach! It's Alicol.
It's Alicol.
Oh. What do you... Okay. The first question I'm going to ask is, when do you think this started? Because I think that this started right after the end of episode 5 of last season. That's my guess. That it's been happening for a while. And that we're just seeing this happen now. And, it's very awful that even after the death of Jaehaerys, that they're still going at it.
Yeah, for sure. That is not a time I'd want to be going at it. But I do think that we're going to learn very quickly whether it's a new thing or not. I think that if it's not a new thing, if this has been going on for a while, they have to tip their hand earlier rather than later, so it doesn't feel like a betrayal. And also, we need to they need to have a conversation establishing what their relationship looks like if it's going to be a core thesis of the show. So if it's brand new and they're still figuring things out, we need to know that. And if it's been a thing they've been doing for quite some time, we need to know that also. So hopefully we get an answer to that. I think it is a more recent development, but there's been tensions there for a while. I think there are many people as I get older where we we hit it off, but circumstances make it so that we both know a relationship is just not a thing that could work out. And I think that when you're in a position of power too, she has to be married to the king. That's her political piece to play. Mm-hmm. So even if she liked Cole, she couldn't act on those urges without severe political risk to the both of them. We've seen what happens to adulterers in King's Landing with past rulers as well. We know. It was one of the conciliator's daughters who her secret boyfriend was put to death, and she was forced to watch. I don't think she would have taken that risk, and then also risked her and her father's political plans. But maybe I'm wrong, and we'll be proven wrong about that. But I think that this is a sort of frustration sort of thing. They both hit the point where he has reasons not to be with her, she has reasons not to be with him, but there's clearly some level of interest there they were able to put off when they had good enough reasons. And now there's a king who is not actually going to care all that much about somebody besmirching their honor, and there is a
it's his mother.
yeah, that's true. But there's the calculus is a little bit better. Kristen Cole could not sleep with the king's wife and not expected to lose his head, but his odds are a little bit better with the king's unmarried, widowed mom. And moreover, Alicent is willing to back him up, to vouch for him. She is not at risk now of having a relationship with him. So I think that is probably why that they had a lot of tension romantically and sexually for years and years and years, and they were finally given a opportunity to act on it, and they took it, I think is my interpretation of it. And doing so at a highly tumultuous time and acknowledging that there are still risks, that just the calculus had changed, is still bad for the both of them. And they're going to realize very quickly that they were fools to act on it. Or if they have been carrying on an affair for years, they're fools to start it to begin with, and just because it got a little easier to do doesn't mean that it was anywhere close to the right decision, because the consequences for both of them are pretty serious. Even still, even if it's not, you're going to be a silent sister and you're going to lose your head or go to the wall, there's still serious political consequences. Cole could be kicked off the Kingsguard, and Alicent could be forced into another marriage to stop something like this from happening again. Those are things that they could be threatened with. And if somebody wants to blackmail them, I think that's a very likely thing that happens this season, is somebody who knows blackmails either Cole or Alicent. I think more likely
Cough, Larys. Larys probably knows.
Larys can absolutely blackmail Alicent using this information, or blackmail Cole using this information.
Zach, did you notice that they're doing it in Rhaenyra's old room?
No.
Yeah. Oh, that's disturbing.
Yeah, it's all sorts of not fun.
I read into that as sort of the shadow of Rhaenyra is lingering over the both of them as they as they're going at it. Because, Kristen clearly harbors ill feelings towards Rhaenyra, and Alicent does as well, even though it's not as intense. But, I kind of read it as, every time they're going at it, it's just, the most awful, rebound sex ever.
Well, yeah, and
every time.
Alicent resents Rhaenyra because Alicent has played the role a woman is expected to play in the society. She married somebody she really wasn't that into. She gave that person kids. She did things the way that she was told. Well, meanwhile, Rhaenyra had a relationship with Laenor where they were both not actually dating each other. It was a sham marriage, and everybody in the world kind of knew it. And the relationship she got into afterwards was her own choice, basically. Hey, I'm marrying Daemon, my uncle, and nobody can stop me. And in some ways, you can view that as her projecting the sort of patriarchal structures of the society. And Alicent has resentment because she hasn't had the choices that Rhaenyra did. If she wanted to be an important person, if she wanted to be anything other than a silent sister or quietly married away to a small lord, she had to play the game. And now she doesn't have to play the game anymore, and she's immediately going, well, what would Rhaenyra do? It's almost like Homer's Enemy, where Frank Grimes is like, you know what, fine, I'm Homer Simpson. I can go around and break the rules because he'll get away with it, and then doesn't realize there'll be consequences. Cole is very similar. Cole resents Rhaenyra because she broke down those boundaries because she thinks they're bullshit. Rhaenyra's whole thing is that codes of honor are bullshit, patriarchy is bullshit, I want to do what I want to do, and in a lot of ways that's good in her rebellious spirit, as like pointing out a lot of society's contradictions, but at the same time it means that she's prone to making, decisions out of spite and not out of logic. And Cole is one person where she's like, hey, I'm going to sleep with my guard that's bound to celibacy and really complicate our relationship, and then I'm just going to like shrug when it comes to like having a conversation about that. And that makes him horribly resentful, and I don't think he has the right to be this seething, quasi, hateful misogynist about it. But I think he said, hey, we should figure out what the fuck's going on with us, and getting a cold shoulder has led him to, have a ton of things he should be seeing a therapist about. Yes. I don't think if that was, a chip on his shoulder, but he was otherwise, a chill dude, I think we'd be more sympathetic to him about that. But no, he has let that define who he is. He has this raging resentment for the fact that he was tossed aside so easily. And it's just super duper unhealthy, and it's turning him into this, gross, incel-y misogynist. And now, of course, he has an outlet for his frustrations in his relationship with Allison. And I don't think it's healthy for evil. I think it's the worst, it's the most, poorly thought out rebound sex ever. I agree. It is a relationship that allows them to sort of stew in some emotions that, in a better world, they'd be seeing a therapist about.
Yeah, totally. Ugh. I find it disgusting that, Kristen Cole is doing the exact thing he essentially broke up. Kristen Cole is doing the exact thing he didn't want to do with Rhaenyra, which is, quote, Kristen didn't want to be Rhaenyra's whore. He wanted to marry her and go off to a Shire, whatever. And now he's in the exact same thing with Alicent. And he's suddenly fine with it. And it's just... Ugh.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of it is the resentment and the desire to feel, anything, and an outlet for his emotions on that. Yeah. Because I get at the emotional core what's driving him there. He's just letting his worst demons... That's sort of like the theme of this season, is people are letting their worst qualities consume them. Alicent's sort of resentment for the political role she's had to play is coming to a head, and Cole's desire... Cole clearly doesn't respect his own knight's vows that he took. He clearly has a lot of resentment towards Rhaenyra because he knows he's soiled his vows, and he has to live with that, and he, in his mind, got nothing in return, right? She spurned me, and I had to give up my vows, and she had to give up nothing. And he's angry about that, and he can't let go of that, and he can't, we get a better, toxic knight story with Jaime, where he learns, I can't undo the past, but I can be a person now.
Yeah.
And I can try and be less of a shitty person, and I can stay away from the people who bring out the worst in me, like Cersei. Mm-hmm. This is the opposite. This is if you
I don't think we're getting that with Cole.
A toxic piece of shit.
Yeah. And the way he sort of, Alicent says that she thinks he's someone who seeks absolution, and in Kristen Cole, in his world, absolution isn't repenting for what he's done. It's just sending people who accuse him away. That's what he did with Sir Eric this episode. It's he's projecting. It's you soiled the White Cloak. You were the reason why Jaehaerys died. You besmirched the name of the Kingsguard and all that, and ultimately he sends him to his death. You know.
Yes, he he sends him to a suicide mission because, well, he can't process his own failures. He has to find an emotional outlet for that. It allows him to give into his anger. It allows him to give into his rage. He's a very like anger and violence are his like cornerstones for dealing with his emotions, because we see him just commit so many murders out of a frustration, out of a anger, out of a bout of rage in the first season, and now we're seeing him do that with political decisions he can make, with the control he has over his fellow Kingsguard, and I think now that he's head of the king, we'll see him take out his personal beef, his personal feelings that he can't transmute into a melancholy or a sadness or find a healthy outlet for. He is going to throw soldiers at, basically, and I think we got our first taste of that. I can't deal with the fact that my own bad decisions led to a child dying and it has hurt the relationships of people that I ostensibly care about or at least have feelings for, and it has besmirched my name as the head of the Kingsguard. I can't deal with that on my own, so I need to send somebody else to make it their problem, and that's the only way I know how to process emotions.
Yeah, exactly. Which we'll see how this relationship progresses as we get more episodes, I think. Let's talk. Oh, do you want to talk about the duel, Zach?
It's my favorite scene of the episode. It's really good.
Yeah.
And they did the perfect amount of letting us not be sure who's who, and then reminding us that it never becomes like I have no idea what's happening, but it never stops being tense either.
Yeah.
I think as far as filming goes, that was the best filmed part of the episode.
I agree. And I feel like they did a good job, capturing a sort of healthy medium between the two stories that we get in the books, which is, there's one version of the story where, in the books, the two Erics were essentially like screaming at each other and yelling at each other and cursing each other the entire time, and the duel only lasted like 2 minutes or something. And then there's like another more like flowery version of the story where they duel for hours and they're like crying the entire time and declaring how much they love each other. I feel like this is like a pretty happy medium where, the fight was relatively short, but they weren't cursing each other the entire time. They clearly still love each other. And
yes, I thought the struggle between their love for their brother, their love for, the desire to have a good relationship with them versus unlike Kristen Cole, they both committed to their oaths. One of them was given an order to kill somebody by their commanding officer, and he's got to do it. And the other is sworn to protect their queen, and he's going to do it. And that means that one of them has to kill the other, and they understand that, and it's tragic because they do care. This is the person in the world they least want to have to kill, and for both of them it's necessary. And they milk the tragedy of that in an action scene incredibly well, which is hard to do, to feel anything other than like the wallop of a punch and the tension in the fight in a fight scene, to imbue it with that sort of tragedy. Kudos. That's very hard, and they did it incredibly well.
Yeah. And this is like a legendary battle in Westerosi history. In the first few chapters in the first book, A Game of Thrones, Bran thinks about the song "Farewell, My Brother," based on this exact fight, and we see in this episode that like this was a scrappy fight. They were like punching each other. They were like at one point, I think one of the Erics reached into a wound and then like tore that. Like it was a scrappy fight. It was dirty, and that just goes to show like these sort of romanticized stories of war and of battles, like they're not pretty. Like in reality, they're always like just really, really horrible things. And there's
war
not
is
a lot.
always hell, and it's always nasty, and there's no pretty fight to the death, because you're gonna be breaking vital parts of your body, which is made of flesh and does not break easily.
Yeah, exactly. Which another thing, one thing I found weird is that this did not close the episode. Did you find that as well? Kind of weird. Because we got 2 Alical endings back to back, and I was like, huh, did we really need that? Like, I would assume that the big climactic battle would be the ending, but I don't know.
I feel like that should have been the closing, and then we would have had more time to breathe, but they don't have as many episodes as they would like. I would have liked this to be the ending to one episode, and maybe 5 minutes of Rhaenyra dealing with the aftermath, or like a few minutes of like watching her like process what just happened would have been a good ending to the episode. And then I feel like having the dismissal of Otto Hightower also be its own like ending episode finish would have been great. I feel like both of them not being the end of the episode, and then also getting more of the Alicent and Cole story is one of my least favorite parts of the episode. Is that the pacing on that is we're dealing with so much all at once at the end, and we have a lot to think about afterwards. And some of those could have used some room to breathe. Yeah,
definitely. But overall, like, this scene was really good, and I would say, like, is this the best sword fight we've ever had in Thrones, like, as a franchise? Because I'm struggling to think of what tops this. Like, I guess Jaime and Brienne was really good, but I mean, the way that this was choreographed and filmed, it was, and the emotion behind it too. Like, this might be our best sword fight in Thrones.
Yeah. This might be, out of all the ones we've seen, of all the one-on-one duels, I think the only duel that comes close is the Mountain and the Viper, and that's not a sword fight, that's a sword versus spear. Out of the, like, night-to-night combat, this is probably the best we've ever gotten.
And I mean, it helps that the last thing we saw was, like, the last sword fight we saw was Jaime and Euron going at it.
But, yeah, that one was pretty good. I think the only one that, I think the first Braun fight is really good, but it doesn't have the emotional weight of this one. Yeah. So I think that this one is probably up there, probably better than that. But I'll have to rewatch all the sword fights.
Yes. Yeah. Good scene.
Very good scene, yes.
We're in spoiler territory now, Zach.
Oh boy.
So as you can see,
Alan.
Yeah, exactly, Alan. We're in spoiler territory. We're gonna be talking about things in Fire and Blood and things that will be coming up. Just to let people know. So yeah, Zach, the first thing I want to talk about is some of the new POVs we've gotten this season, and I guess because I have this image up, let's talk a little bit about Alan of Hull and Adam of Hull, and, you know, where you think their story is going this season. Because, you know, we know that eventually Adam becomes a dragon rider, and Alan commands some ships. But what do you think, how do you think they're going to get there? That's what I'm trying to say.
I think that we're going to get, we know the title of the 4th episode. I think it is going to be, since we're fully in spoiler territory,
yes.
I think that it's going to be the death of Rhaenys and the first, like, dragons they lose, and they realize they have more dragons than they have riders, and they need to just amp up as many people as they can. Mm-hmm. We've met Hugh Hammer also, who I'm sure is going to be mentioned, but we've set the dragon seeds very well. I think that they're going to be some of the first ones. Corlys is going to be like, well, now that I don't have to like hide them from my wife, I've got 2 bastard kids. They can probably ride a dragon. And bringing in Alan and Adam, I think, is probably the smartest way to like start bolstering their numbers.
Which, like,
and they seem like fun characters. They immediately have a real good charm to them.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the chemistry between the two of them this episode. I felt like it was really believable that they were two brothers. And okay, here's the thing: do you think that next episode, in episode 3, Corlys will confront Rhaenys about it, or something along the lines of that? Or do you think that's going to be something that is left, that Corlys does not talk to her about and he kind of feels guilty of in the later episodes?
I think he's going to feel guilty that he couldn't be there for them as a father. He's going to feel some guilt over not just fathering bastards, but not, having politically to never visit them. Because I think clearly, like, he's lost his true boy kids, and it clearly pains him, and we see that quite a bit. And I think that the ability to, like, the one scene we got where he's very thankful for him, you could tell that he knows this is his kid, and it's kind of choking him up a little bit that he can't say anything about it because he'd like to. So I think that's what Corlys's relationship with them is going to be. Tragically, I've lost my wife, but the silver lining is I have family still, and I should be reaching out to them.
Mm-hmm. There was this, like, lingering shot of Corlys, not in this episode, but in episode 1, when Alan mentions that he has a brother, and, like, it was like a face of shock. I don't know, what do you think about that? Like, do you think it's possible that Corlys is thinking, oh, there's another one in that moment?
It's possible, like, he doesn't know if that one is his son or not.
Yeah.
It might be the case that they're not. We don't know 100% yet, and that's always something that was left ambiguous-ish. I mean, in the books certainly imply heavily they're both Corlys's, but officially, for the purposes of not getting him in trouble, they're Laenor's bastards from before he married Rhaenyra, or during, depending, because he's dead in the books, and he is dead as far as they're concerned in the show. So I think it's entirely possible that he is not the father of one of them, and they're going to go a little bit of a different direction. But it's also entirely possible he's just like, oh, I knew about the one. She didn't tell me about the second. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Zach, we see Ulf this episode. Did you catch him?
Where was Ulf?
It was the scene where we see the rat catchers getting hanged. He was the person who stole the potato. That's Ulf. And we know that, from looking at the actor who plays Ulf. And
nice.
Yeah. So we've seen all the dragon seeds, and that makes me very happy that we've been introduced to them this early in the season.
I still stand by my Bob Odenkirk should have been Ulf take, but that's fine. I like the direction they're taking Hugh, and I think Ulf is going to be a little bit more... He might be more of a comedic foil at first, and then Hugh... I think they're going to do an interesting thing where Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White's turn is kind of ridiculous and unjustified in the books. A bigger dragon diplomacy, my men believe in me, I have a dragon, Ulf and I are going to fight, and then I'm going to be king. I think they're setting him up to actually be a pretty competent, intelligent person.
Sure.
He understands the small folks' trouble. He becomes disillusioned with Rhaenyra because of her, poor decision-making and her willingness to pardon certain, lords, or at the very least not promise things like, land and all that. And I think he's going to be more of a popular uprising among the soldiers who are disproportionately small folk. I think he's going to say, okay, I thought Rhaenyra was going to be better for the small folk. I promise to be better for the small folk. And maybe he's lying about that. And maybe he just sees it as a political opportunity.
Or maybe he's telling the truth.
Running on a very populist-y message.
Yeah. Or maybe he genuinely does care about the small folk, and that's going to be why he eventually decides to rise up against both Rhaenyra and the Greens. which I think it's going to be, I think what's going to play out is, we see in the trailers that Hugh is, like fighting his way through the crowd during a food riot or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be what prompts him to leave King's Landing for, I don't know, Dragonstone. And eventually he's going to realize that, both parties, both the Greens and the Blacks, don't really care about the small folk, and that's why he wants to become king eventually.
Yeah, and then the version of him we got is propaganda because it's the elite class who wrote the books.
Because all bastards are
they want to make him
treacherous.
Yeah, they want to make him seem like a treacherous bastard and not a man who understood the small folk. And I think we might even see it's possible that Ulf is his brother or half brother, and they know each other.
Sure,
so
yeah.
One of them might hear about the search for dragon seeds and then go get the other and say hey, we've got an opportunity. So it might be that Ulf is consistently broke because he's a dysfunctional alcoholic, but he hears about the dragon seeds because he's closer to King's Landing, and he knocks on Hugh's door and says, Hugh, they need dragon seeds, Hugh. We're both busy too as our dad, Hugh. And then he's like, what? You're a drunken fool. Get out of here. And he's like, no, it's real. If you go to Dragonstone. And I think that might be something we see. And I hope that's the case, really. I hope that we get to understand the relationship between the two of them. Because if they're both brothers, then the two of them just being random treacherous bastards is not the plot. It is one of them thinks he'd be a better king, and the other is there to back up their brother, and then they get an army behind them, and they actually look like a credible threat to the establishment that has to be wiped out.
Yeah.
That would be a fun path to go down, and that would make the fight with them all the more impactful because while they are causing a fight, while they are betraying the person they swore fealty to, if they have a point that's going to complicate this entire fight in a way that's very complex and satisfying, and it's going to make there be a ton of tension when we do get to that fight.
Yeah, and one thing that I appreciate about this season so far is that it seems like they're spending more time with the small folk, and seeing how they're being affected. The scene with Aemond and the I forget her name, but the sex worker. She tells Aemond that when princes lose their anger, it's often the small folk who suffer. And, we see that with people like Mazaria this episode as well. And yeah. I feel like going into the future, it's going to be a situation where the small folk are, they're actually going to impact the story in pretty big ways.
We know that when Rhaenyra is in King's Landing, she is going to have an active
it's going to be terrible. Yeah,
start from the bottom, and I think we're going to see that there's some legitimate anger there against both the Blacks and the Greens, and that's why they're going to rally around some of these other figures because they distrust both. And then I think we're also going to see that there are going to be some highborn people who will fan the flames because they see an opportunity there. I think Larys will be deeply involved in organizing. There's going to be peasant discontent.
Yeah.
He is going to organize it in politically useful directions instead of just generalized riots and anger. He might be the reason we get the spoilers, storming of the dragon pit.
Yeah, the storming of the dragon pit. Yeah.
He's the person who is going to say, okay, I know you're angry against the queen. One way you can really weaken her rule is to kill all of her dragons. And of course that weakens her rule not only in a way that the peasants can revolt, but it gives the Greens such an advantage in the conflict if they have any dragons left and she has none.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the storming of the dragon pit is a visual symbol of the small folks revolting against the Targaryen dynasty as a whole. Do you think the shepherd will be someone we've already seen? Do you think the shepherd could be Larys, or?
I think my thought is the shepherd is going to be a random, like, person who's kind of lost his mind, who preaches and has some, like, a small following, and he looks kind of like Laris. And he is like a look where Laris realizes, because he might wear like a cloak or something like that. Laris realizes he can take the place of this like kind of like kooky old preacher at strategic moments and whip up his crowd into a frenzy, and that's why Laris is able to be the shepherd for a little bit, and then he's immediately able to go back to crazy nonsense afterwards, because that's what we're told in the books. He gives these very pointed political like sermons that have actual like policy goals, and then he gives unrealistic ones about like living in the woods together in peace and harmony afterwards. I think that Laris is going to step in to... He's going to, like, get the priest plastered or something so he can't give a sermon.
Oh!
Fill it for him. Get his flock to grow and to, like, become this, like, you know, vicious mob that can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
And then, to cover his trail, it just goes back to being the old crazy priest pastor on the corner.
Once Laris doesn't need him anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, he becomes the fall guy for things he never did. Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. Tangentially related. I've been thinking. I've been thinking maybe the reason Helena, seems to, I don't want to say detest, but like at least not care and almost be scared of the small folk. I think, you know, in part it's because she gets overstimulated very easily and possibly on the autism spectrum. But I think it also has to do with the fact that maybe she sees maybe she's received visions of the storming of the dragon pit already. You know, like...
Oh, yeah.
Like, she sees her face... Like, she sees their faces storming the dragon pit and killing her dragon, Dreamfire. And that's why she's terrified of them.
Yeah. She knows they're going to turn on her and her dragon. And if you believe there's a mental connection with dragons, maybe she is seeing the same future that her dragon is seeing, and she is seeing both of their deaths.
How cool would that be?
Yeah, that would be very cool.
The lore implication that Dreamfire has dragon dreams as well. Like, what does that say about Reyna? Oh, that's a good point. Actually, what does what does that say about Reyna, the sister of Jaehaerys and Alysanne, who rode Dreamfire before? I don't know.
There's a lot of implications there. And then if dragons are able to share their worldview, share their dreams, and if they're able to see the future, have any mystical powers or connections, that changes. So, like, the Black Dread, if he knew he was going to fly to Valyria for some purpose, if he knew that was how he was going to go out, and the fact he still went, that's fascinating. Or if the dragons can't go north of the wall because they know what's up there and they know what happens eventually to dragons. Like, if they have a beautiful vision of the future and they can tell and sense things, then that makes a lot of interesting lore implications. I don't know if that's the direction they're going, but they certainly set it up so that is a possible direction they could go.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I definitely think that there's going to be some mystical explanation of why the dragons are the way they are in the show, and why they do some of the things that they do. Like, yeah, because we have instances in Fire and Blood where dragons kind of go rogue, and we see in the show that, you know, Vhagar has already gone rogue and killed Arax, which, ugh.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. We can see that dragons have minds of their own to some extent. And we don't know the powers that entails.
Yeah. I'm thinking, like, what have we seen? We've seen, what have we been told? There's Cyrax in the dragon pit, kind of going rogue. There's, 2 dragons at the second Tumbleton, that kind of went rogue. I forget who, but yeah, interesting stuff. I have a picture of Aegon here. I don't know why. I don't know why I moved him to the end. But honestly, I feel like this is a good place to end. I feel like we've talked about a lot of good things.
It comes kind of full circle, and the emotional weight that goes into the decisions of the characters and their stronger emotions betraying them have been the themes of the first 2 episodes so far.
Yeah.
You could even say that Blood and Cheese were betrayed by their fear, an emotion that can override your ability to make better decisions. And Aegon II is the perfect example of that, and every other character. Mm-hmm. They do it, but they don't do it quite as well as he does. And I think that if we're going to talk about what's coming next, I think the next 2 episodes are going to be about his anger, his hubris, and his readiness for action are going to be the main drivers of episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So I think that is what you should be on the lookout for.
Yeah. And, after episode 4, I'm really interested to see, where Aemon's story goes.
Yeah. He at least seems to have, he has other coping mechanisms, but he seems to be able to, he was able to lay down in a brothel naked and cope, right? He had outlets that were not purely unhealthy ones. And while we've definitely seen him cope and deal with things in an unhealthy way, he's able to take a step back. I think that's the main difference we're going to get between him and Aegon, is that Aegon simply cannot stop himself.
Yeah.
He cannot act rationally. He cannot act calmly. The emotions will take him over. And that's what I'm looking forward to in episodes 3 and 4. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments.
Yeah. Because we're in spoiler territory, and this is probably going to be the last thing. Do you think we're going to see much of Aegon in episodes 5 through 8? After, he gets badly burnt? What do you think Aegon does at that point? Is he just there?
I don't think he'll be out of commission at first. I think that they'll use that as an opportunity to... I think we're going to see some shifting of power in the Greens.
Gotcha.
And that he is going to eventually be able to regain power through working with a couple close people who are helping him out. I think that we're going to see him out of commission for a while, unsure whether he's going to live or die, and they make the decision to basically pass him over for Aemond as commander and leader of the Greens, and they use that as an opportunity to rid themselves of the man who is speedrunning their own collapse.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, this season's going to be so fun.
Yes, I'm very excited. They've set themselves up for success.
Yeah.
And I really want to see how that works.
Yeah, which going into the season, I was worried that they were going to drop the ball, and now those worries have completely dissipated. I have full confidence in Ryan Condal and the rest of this season. At the very least.
I'm pretty happy. I think they're doing a good job. I'm not completely sold yet, but this is definitely a big step up from last season, and last season was pretty good. So this one is definitely like it's on track to potentially be great.
Okay. Cool stuff. Yeah. I think that'll wrap up our discussion. Zach, where can people at home find you?
You can check out the Interesting Nerd Club for me and Tom talking about our Song of Ice and Fire takes.
Yeah.
The Interesting Nerd Network for other stuff, and Zach from the club for video essays. I should hopefully have one coming soon. And if you want to hear my music, you can check out Deter LaCroix. That's a lot of things to check out. Check out all of them.
Yes, I'll probably have all of them linked down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Of course. And yeah, thank you once again for coming on this show and talking about House of the Dragon. Yeah. All right. Peace.
See ya.